Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's live stream. I have no guests joining me today apart from your good selves. So do fire away comments so we can interact with those through the hour this evening. Plenty to talk about on this warm summer's evening, as ever. So where shall we begin? Let's begin by finding... give me a minute. Right. Find our pictures for this week. Here they come. I'm a bit rusty at this again. Right, here we go. Here we are. Last week I forgot to play the intro video. This week I forgot to get my slides in. Right, there they are. Right, so first one here, Scottish Daily Mail and the Scottish Daily Express. I do find it a bit tedious. I don't read any of these papers regularly, but sometimes I'll look at the headlines, look along. Daily Express in particular, like every article, there's some sort of, SNP useless, SNP can't do it this right, SNP in chaos, SNP fall into bits, SNP collapses, SNP humiliated. I mean, it's really tedious. I think anyone who sort of enjoys a routine diet like that really ought to step back and think, is that really what they're wanting? But sometimes the stories are quite substantial and interesting, but like this constant hammering away at the SNP is a bit tedious. I find some people might say it's necessary, but which is anyway. I thought this Daily Mail article was an example of that. SNP in chaos, as Blackford set for comeback. But I don't know why that's chaos. The fact that Kate Forbes is not standing for re-election, they'll need a new candidate. Ian Blackford seems like an obvious choice. He's in the area. His constituency, former constituency, basically covers, overlaps with most of Kate Forbes's constituency. But the reason I wanted to bring this up in particular is what a change it would be to replace Kate Forbes with Ian Blackford, because they've got some similarities and they've got some very distinct differences as well. Similarities, obviously, SNP. Nationalism, Scottish nationalism is very important to them. And the other interesting thing about them as well is they're both members of the Free Church of Scotland. Now, you probably didn't know that, did you? But the last I heard, Ian Blackford was a member of the Free Church of Scotland. I've even heard people say there's an elder in the Free Church of Scotland. I haven't confirmed that. But certainly, the last I've heard, he was a member of the Free Church of Scotland. Now, Ian Blackford's his opinions is expressed on controversial topics where the teachings of the Free Church of Scotland might be in tension with the SNP, let's say. Ian Blackford, 100% of the time, has always sided with the SNP. So same-sex marriage, I mean, the whole LGBT inclusive education, you name it, he's gone with the SNP flow, and there hasn't been the slightest hint of him actually standing up for what apparently is his church believes. At some point in the past, the Free Church of Scotland made a public statement about Ian Blackford, just pointing out that what Ian Blackford was saying was not in line with church teaching, with what the church believed. They said, we just wanted to say that, we'll leave it at that, we're not going to make any further statements, but we just wanted to clarify that. Which I thought was possibly a good way to deal with things. The Free Church of Scotland hasn't done that with Kate Forbes when she said things totally the opposite of the church's teaching. But then basically the difference between Kate Forbes and Ian Blackford is that Kate Forbes, in my opinion, hearing about her, talking about her faith, that sounds genuine. When I heard Ian Blackford talking about his faith, he was talking about, his mum's Bible and this sort of thing. I didn't really pick up any sort of reassurance that he is actually a Christian. So then Kate Forbes does actually believe something roughly like the teachings of the Free Church of Scotland. But she doesn't say it very often at all and will deny them on occasion. I think Ian Blackford doesn't even believe them. So if that area changes from constituency, changes from Kate Forbes to Ian Blackford, that will be, quite a stark illustration of the direction of travel of the SNP. I think that Kate Forbes' decision to stand down has had a very powerful effect on a lot of people. And I think a lot of Christians in particular, other people as well, are saying, well, maybe you would have supported the SNP, not just in her constituency, in other parts of Scotland. Maybe I would have supported the SNP because Kate Forbes made them seem a bit more reasonable and mainstream and not quite so fanatically progressive. But now they're thinking, well, if Kate Forbes is going, then that's me going as well. I'm not going to support the SNP anymore. I think the impact in the Highlands and Islands might be particularly strong. So politically, from the point of view of the Scottish Family Party, I think Kate Forbes' departure is good news. Because Kate Forbes has always been the, if you like, the poster girl for getting involved in a mainstream party and, making a difference and influencing it from within. Whereas our line's always been, no, that's not the right thing to do. That's not the effective thing to do, because it just ends up in terrible compromise and eventually people's will breaks. And generally it ends up with the politicians compromising. But with Kate Forbes standing down, I think the leading proponent, if you like, of the other side of the argument is leaving the stage. So politically for the Family Party, that is good news. Ian Blackford coming back, to be honest, that would be good news for us as well, because we want to be able to contrast ourselves with the other parties, and we'd certainly be able to do that very effectively with Ian Blackford. Okay, let's see what else we've got here. Now, this is just a very short story I just make mention. So I do 5 comments in, by the way. 2 men charged with inciting racial hatred after protest in Aberdeen. This would be a asylum seeker, so-called hotel type protest. 2 people charged with inciting racial hatred. Now, I read the report on this as well, and you read the whole report, and you don't know at the end of the report what these people said. And this is the problem with this, like, incitement and hate speech type laws, is you have a report. If there's a crime, I want to know, a speech crime, if you like, I want to know what the person said and what they've been found guilty of, or what they've been arrested for, what was the punishment. And then I want to make a judgment about whether or not the police, the courts, the law are as I think they ought to be. I want to be able to make that judgment. But the problem is, 2 men charged with inciting racial hatred, what did they say? Don't know. No idea. So how can we judge what's going on here when we're not given the information about the alleged crime that's been committed? And this is very frustrating, and it's a problem with this type of law. Because people say, oh, if what they said incites racial hatred, then if it gets published in the Herald, even if it's in the court report, that's going to incite racial hatred. So obviously we can't allow this to be said. So we can have the situation where people are convicted, but we don't know what's going on. I mean, I guess the court proceedings will still be an open court, so journalists will be able to report at that point, hopefully. But it's quite easy to see how the logic, so-called, would go, that if this is inciting racial hatred, we can't allow these words to be released to the general public, because obviously they'll incite racial hatred. So we need to keep it secret. So the whole legal process becomes opaque, which will be very concerning. We're already partly down that line. And I think that's something that needs to be avoided at all costs. And the other issue bubbling away in the background still is this, fair trials for, particularly men accused of rape or sexual assault. There really is a head of steam up among lawyers, advocates on this issue, who are saying that the current system is making it so that the accused are not getting a fair trial because they're not permitted to bring into court vital evidence that were extremely relevant and would support their case very strongly. They're not allowed to bring it in. So this issue is not going away. And, well, let's see where it heads. Certainly with the current Scottish government, it's going nowhere, because they're sort of feminist fanatics, and they think these changes in the law, the legal process, were driven by feminism, so they must be good. If it's men getting convicted wrongly, well, that's just men, isn't it? As long as more women are getting complaints or resulting in convictions, then that's all they care about. Justice goes out of the window. Right, what have we got next? Again, there's another very short story. Just thought I'd mention. That's a BBC report. Waterstones apologises after readers' brand event utter chaos. So this was an event a bookshop staged, and they invited people to it, and it ended up a bit overcrowded and a bit muddly. Okay, how is that a news story? How is that a news story on the BBC? And I feel with this, surely think about all the things that are going on in Britain. This is a London story. Think of all the things that are going on in Britain that the BBC could report on. There's a lot of things going very, very wrong, but there'll be all sorts of things going very, very well as well. Now, this is about the book industry, book trade, if you like, bookshops. So they could have had an article about the state of the book trade in Britain. That would have been quite an intelligent, insightful, interesting article. Or there could be, what about like the defense industry? Won't you find anything on the BBC about the defense industry? Virtually never. But they do things about like, publishing and acting, things that they know about, but other forms of industry that are not either politically relevant or on the BBC's wavelength, they just get ignored. But it just really struck me that they chose to make an article out of this fairly trivial mix-up at a bookshop's event, and that becomes a news story. And I feel with the BBC sometimes they love to report, these organizations are making a total hash of it, total mess of it. If only the BBC could be running everything. But look how they manage when they're in charge of things. Well, they've had a fair few total disasters as well. So with this drive to report even like trivial mix-up and messes up or whatever, it's really unhelpful. Stick to the real issues. Help people to understand what's really going on in the country. And that will produce a more informed electorate. All right, now we'll maybe spend a bit longer. Good evening, David and Kathy. I don't know if you saw this story. This is in Scotland, in Glasgow, if I remember rightly. So it's about this lady here, nicknamed Big Mag's Granny, and she had 2 claims to fame. This is back, back quite a few. I think she died 10 years ago now, at least. And her claims to fame were being a paedophile hunter. In other words, one of these vigilante people who maybe pose as a child online, enter into conversations with adults, and then sort of lure them in. So the child will go along with the grooming, if you like, and then agree to meet up with the adult. When the adult goes to meet up with them, they find there's a bunch of people, there's just civilians there who followed the online chat, and the civilians basically make a citizen's arrest, call the police, hand over the evidence, and then, well, what happens then? In some cases, I think people have been charged, but it's a sort of grey area, really. Vigilante action is not encouraged. Let's put it that way. For obvious reasons, it could go very, very wrong. If you've got people in like an angry mob mentality, going to be getting someone that they've decided is like predatory paedophile, then it's quite likely that that person is going to be mistreated. I think often they're not. They're treated quite reasonably and just restrained until the police come along. But my main concern with this like paedophile hunting tradition, if you like, movement, is that the attitude behind it. It's a bit like you hear about in prison. It's that real hatred towards paedophiles. And obviously, hatred towards paedophilia and child abuse, perfectly fine. But hatred towards a group of people, sometimes that needs to be balanced up with, well, let's not remember, we're not perfect either. And, there's lots of other sort of crimes going on. But the paedophile hunting movement tends to generate real extreme hatred and hostility towards paedophiles. Now, they would say, well, that's what we need. We need a bit more of that. Well, maybe a bit more hostility and action and initiative against paedophiles would be helpful. But this sort of unrestrained hatred isn't. Anyway, so that's one side of what she did. But then the other side of what she did, it came out later, maybe it even only came out after she died, was that she was a huge drugs dealer, running a heroin empire, gangster, basically. I mean, that's just illustrating what I'm saying, isn't it? That on the one hand, she's doing something that she would say confirmed her as a really, really good person. And then behind the scenes, she's doing something which I would say was probably worse on a far larger scale. And if you're a drug dealer on a large scale, heroin, you're responsible for basically killing probably dozens of people through her money-making activities as a drug dealer. So it was just an interesting one like that. Let's have a look at, right. So right. So she died 12 years ago, age 70. And this is one of her relatives, believes her grandmother's legacy is more complex than was portrayed in the media. 2 things can be true at one time. You can be a drug dealer that sold drugs and that have potentially killed people, but you could still also be a loving grandmother and a good person. Now, I thought that was quite interesting. Can you be a drug dealer and a good person? So a drug dealer, so you know that what you're doing is you're making money out of causing misery, pain, and death to your customers, and you know that, and you're doing that on as large a scale as you can you still be a good person? So the fact that you're still a good family, a good grandmother, does that mean that you're a good person? Well, I would say, I mean, one way of looking at it is trying to answer the question, is someone a good person? Maybe isn't a very helpful thing to do, to try and give like a global assessment of a person. But it got me thinking, because if you think about, say, politicians, I mean, I might be tempted to say, like, John Swinney seems like a decent sort of person. He seems like sort of reasonably honest, level-headed sort of person. But on the other hand, you've got to compare that with what they do. I mean, he supports like corruption of children sexually through sex education on an industrial scale, supports the killing of the unborn. So does it make sense to say he's a good person, but he supports these other things? I mean, surely these other things are so grave that you can't say someone's a good person. So certainly if someone's a drug dealer, I would be very reluctant to describe them in general terms as a good person. But on the other hand, maybe it's just best to avoid that. It's best to avoid giving people that sort of classification. Just make the comment about the different aspects of their activities. But I'd say if someone is supporting something that is gravely evil and harmful, then certainly I think there's a place for saying, no, you cannot describe that as a good person if that's what they are involved in. Right, David, fire away. Tell us. Don't keep us in suspense. Just while we're waiting. All right, Mr. Mill, I saw a video. I actually watched the video about this just a few minutes before the live stream started. It was in London. I assume it's the right one. It was a black man basically standing there with his trousers completely down in the tube train. People speak to him, basically get more and more aggressive, and eventually they make a citizen's arrest, maybe slightly more forcefully than necessary. Then they take him off the train, hold him on the ground at the station. I assume the police were called, and I assume some action was taken. My first thought watching that is I tended to think, surely that man's mentally ill. I mean, if someone's, a flasher, I mean, they're not going to like stand there with their trousers and underwear completely down in the middle of a tube train, not responding to anyone or not responding to being spoken to. So I tended to think he was mentally ill, or on drugs or something like that. Judging by his reaction, I'd say more likely mentally ill. But I think the fact that people intervened and dealt with him, I think that's absolutely right. I think we need more of that in Britain. We need more people to intervene in various ways on the spot. Right, David, come on, you're keeping us in suspense now. Right, we'll give you a few minutes. Keep at it. Come on, David. You don't get the typing symbol like you do on is it WhatsApp where you get that? Right, we'll assume an answer to David's point is arriving any second now. Right, just going back to the paedophile hunters. I mean, I guess I would say the police should be doing it. The police should be doing that. Surely it's very efficient use of police time to catch paedophiles doing that. On the other hand, I'm not an expert in the law at all, but it is illegal. The police are not allowed to use what we would call entrapment. In other words, to deliberately cause someone to commit a crime that they might not have otherwise committed in order to trap them. So if someone's stealing money, you can put marked notes in the olden days, stealing physical money. So you can put marked notes in and then trace them and see if they're the ones that have been stolen. Okay. If they've been doing that before, I think maybe what wouldn't necessarily be allowed would be to leave the money out deliberately in a way that would tempt them in a way that they maybe hadn't previously been tempted. And then they steal it, and then the police say, oh, well, we've caught you. So if the police deliberately tempt someone into committing a crime, that's maybe not allowed. So how that would work for police taking over that sort of activity, I don't know. Right, David, so this is the connection between Big Mags and Jimmy Savile. Charity work and attempt to offset his predatory behavior. Big Mags offsets her drug dealing with a paedophile hunting. Yes, that's an interesting point. Yeah, that's a very good parallel to make. So I think the lengths some paedophiles go to to cover their tracks and gain access to children are really very extreme. They will devote their life to getting themselves in a situation with access to children. There's a case I heard about a while ago. I might have mentioned this before on the live stream. In the 2004 tsunami, a person went to Indonesia or whatever, somewhere where had been hit by the tsunami, set up like a home for orphans. And this was a very wealthy person. So this orphanage was on a considerable scale, all sorts of facilities and functions, staff being provided there. And the sole purpose of it, the underlying purpose, was to enable the donor to get access to the, I think it was young boys in it. I mean, quite remarkable degree of commitment or addiction, or I don't know what you'd call it. But yeah, so charity work can be a good cover. Another thing that we could cover, I think, is religious activity as well. I think sometimes pedophiles engage in Christian organizations or whatever, because that's a way of getting access to young people. And sometimes they engage in like Christian organizations because they think it's a cover. It's a way of appearing like a pillar of society, someone who wouldn't be suspected, someone who'd be highly regarded. So they're both there. So yeah, interesting point. Thank you. Let us press on. Oh, what are the BBC like? What are they like? With mainstream media in general, BBC in particular, it's often not so much that they report things that are not true. So what the BBC says has happened, it's true. Not every time. There will be exceptions where they make factually incorrect statements. Now, at this point, maybe some people are thinking, oh, no, you can't believe the BBC. It's all lies. It's not all lies. I mean, virtually everything they say is factually correct. Often the bias comes in choosing which stories they're going to cover. And I think they've got like an LGBT editor or something. And there's just this drip, drip, drip of stories about drag queens. I mean, how is this a news story for Edinburgh, Fife and East of Scotland? Deaf drag queens bids to keep gay sign language alive. Okay, that is not a news story. That is latest excuse to enable us to have a story about drag queens, because that's what our LGBT editor likes to do. It's like they're obsessed, utterly obsessed with drag queens, out of all proportion to it as an alleged art form or to whatever, just obsession coming through again and again and again. And I think one of the reasons they like it is they think this is something that people don't quite know how to argue against, and you can get in front of people of all ages as well. There's no age restriction or whatever, so you can put these stories out. It's assumed to be suitable for children, and I'd say it's an absolute obsession with the BBC. I mean, how many days will it be before they find another excuse to have a news story about drag queens one way or another? Let us see. That's just an interesting little story. The Humanist Society of Scotland, they seem to have, I don't know, woken up again a little bit recently. And if you went back how long, 10 years, a bit longer, 15 years, I mean, these are new atheists. They were really on a roll. Richard Dawkins got his own TV show, a massive cultural movement. But then it's really faded away. It's gone to a pretty low level. But the Humanist Society of Scotland seems to have been popping up a little bit recently. And their mission is basically to do the opposite of what Christians want, or Muslims, basically. So they don't start with a set of moral principles. Their set of moral principles is look at what the real Christians are asking for, or Muslims, and we say the opposite. That's their basically modus operandi. But right, let's look what was interesting about this tweet here. Someone said to me, and I quote, we can't win here with someone who looks like her. Our allies at Engender Scotland, with whom we work on reproductive rights and more, have launched a new campaign highlighting misogyny in the Scottish political system. Right, so the Humanist Society of Scotland is a voluntary association. It might be a charity. It's basically a campaigning group. It's like a political campaigning group on progressive issues. They're like the inverse of the Christian Institute, say, Humanist Society of Scotland. And they talk about their allies at Engender Scotland. Now, I don't know if you know, Engender is Scotland's taxpayer-funded feminist organisation, one of several. It's probably the biggest one. So, taxpayer-funded feminist organisation. So they are allies of the Humanist Society of Scotland. That's quite interesting, isn't it? So which government-funded campaigning group is an ally of any religious group? I mean, there are some Muslim ones, but they're not for upholding Muslim values. They're actually often for undermining traditional Muslim values. But Christian things, absolutely no chance at all. You have that multi-faith, but not anything Christian, certainly not. So it's interesting, the Humanist Society of Scotland, obviously quite cosy with the taxpayer-funded feminists at Engender, with whom we work on reproductive rights. Engender argue for full decriminalisation of abortion, which is coming soon in Scotland. I mean, that'll be in the Scottish Parliament very soon. So I just wanted to point out that connection, which should not be there. Should not be there. It illustrates, again, the sock puppet charity effects. Engender acts as though we're representing the women of Scotland. We're Scotland's feminist organisation. No, they're not. They're an organisation paid by the government to say what the government wants them to say. And Engender would say, oh, no, we don't. That's not true. We criticise the government. We tell the government that they need to change. And the things they tell them they need to change are the things the government wanted to do in any case. So the government's already decided they want to decriminalise abortion. So they pay Engender to try and get public opinion on their side. And then Engender tells the government, then the government says, oh, look, the women's organisation has told us this. We'd better listen to the women, better listen to the feminists, hadn't we? But they're just listening to themselves. And then the Humanist Society of Scotland, obviously, in on the act as well. Now, this tweet was prompted by a story about a black woman candidate, I think an SNP candidate, and someone had said within the party, we can't win here with someone who looks like her. The same happened, I remember, with Anna Sarwar when it was Labour leader. Now, the person who said that might not necessarily be racist. They might be talking about what they think is racism in the electorate, which is a very different thing. So it can actually be perfectly reasonable for someone to say, we've got no chance. Let's say, for example, someone said, we've got no chance of winning here with a woman because they're all sexists and just a woman's not going to win here. Anyone, no matter what your opinion is, anyone could say that. A person who said, don't vote for this person, they're a woman. We don't want women getting elected, do we? Then that would be the sexist. Well, similarly, if someone says, look, they're not going to vote for a black person in such and such a place, that person is expressing an opinion about other people's actions. But if a person said, oh, we don't want a black person being our representative view, oh, we don't want that, then that would be racist. But they often conflate the two and then really have a go at people who maybe are pointing out something about other people's opinions. But yeah, so that's Humanist Society of Scotland. I've been seeing them popping up a little bit more recently. I've emailed them from time to time saying, how about a debate? They used to be always up for a debate. I've done several debates with representatives of the Humanist Society of Scotland, but they don't seem to reply. So as I say, Scotland is a debate desert. Right, let's have a look. What else have we got? Right, don't understand some of this. Okay, right. Well, that's quite funny. Okay, why didn't the atheist cross the road? Because he didn't believe he could reach the other side. Yeah, maybe that could be the spiritualist. It would work as well. Very good. How many women work down mines? Well, very few. I mean, are there any mines left in Scotland? But yeah, that's raising the issue, obviously, that men and women tend to choose different types of work, and that men are more likely to choose extreme, like physical, dirty, dangerous, long hours, sort of unpleasant in some way jobs. And if you've got a job like that and you're trying to get people to do it, how do you do it? Do you do it by, I know, a really lovely sales pitch and tell them it's actually really fun working down a mine? No, you get people to do these jobs by paying them more. So people look at the jobs. Someone might think, okay, working down a mine, sweaty, hard work, in the dark, dangerous. But you know what? Look at that. Look at the wages for that. That's what I'm going to do. Someone else might think, working down a mine, not on your life. I fancy working in a shop. I'll sit at the tail and check people's things they go through. Okay, which is in many ways much more pleasant environment to work in. Now, generally, women tend to go for the sort of more pleasant employment roles, if you like. Men are more willing to go for the ones that are a bit more challenging in some ways, so they tend to earn more. And then feminists say it's not fair. That's a gender pay gap, and they've got to do something about it. Now, you're full of difficult questions for us tonight, Bob. How many men give birth? Well, I think that's a 0 on that one. Just on the trans issue, well, I'll just mention something because I was reminded of it again just recently. It's the intersex issue. And you might be aware of this, but basically intersex is a physical medical condition that affects a very small number of people. But basically, as I understand it, when the human is developing in the womb, basically everyone is heading towards being a woman. That's the way you naturally develop. But in the case of men, the Y chromosome comes in and diverts the path. So instead of carrying on the, if you like, the natural, that's not the right word, the path that would otherwise have been taken to become a woman, the presence of the Y chromosome produces the is it androgen, is that the word? Which then produces a whole cascade of effects that makes it so instead of producing a woman, it produces a man. Now, in some people, they've got the XY chromosome, but the Y chromosome doesn't have any effect, or virtually no effect. So it doesn't actually do anything to the development of the unborn child. So the person is born basically as a girl, as a woman. So will look entirely female. I mean, there'll be some differences in like reproductive organs, internal reproductive organs, but basically the person will have an XY chromosome, but will usually live their life as a woman, and no one would bat an eyelid. And I don't think anyone's got any objection to that. So there are other intersex conditions as well, that are even rarer. But that's basically the slight grey area in the transgender issue. So that's why in the family party, our policy is there is no such thing as changing gender. Repeal the Gender Recognition Act. The only exception would be for genuinely intersex people, where sometimes that there is a decision to make about whether someone's going to live as a man or a woman, because there might be some mosaic of characteristics, or something's gone wrong in this like sexual differentiation process. So we need to remember intersex people. But what the transgender movement does is they try to use intersex people as a wedge issue to therefore lead to the conclusion that gender is just a social construct and anyone can choose whatever they want to. So, yep. Yes, yeah, exactly. Just totally ignoring market forces. I think this is not going to, if you were running a big business now, this is a bit of a nightmare for you. The classic one in supermarkets is supermarkets have got various jobs. They've got the jobs, the people you see at the till or stocking the shelves or whatever. And they, in general, maybe not by a huge margin, but in general, maybe women tend to go for those jobs more. Then there's the behind the scenes jobs in the warehouse at the back of the supermarket, where you're unloading the trucks. A bit dirtier and a bit more like harder physical work, not quite such a nice environment. Maybe you're out in the cold a little bit. Now there's that job as well. Now, traditionally, more men have tended to go for that job. And the behind the warehouse job would tend to be paid a little bit more. Not massive, tend to be paid a little bit more because it's a bit harder physical work, a less pleasant environment. Now, of course, what's happened now is people have looked at supermarkets and said, you've got a gender pay gap. Your qualifications needed to be working at the checkout and working in the warehouse are identical. In other words, like very few qualifications. So these jobs have got identical qualifications, so you should be paying them the same. So the problem they're going to have is they're going to find it difficult to get people to work in the warehouse unless they have to start overpaying everyone, people working in the other jobs, in order to attract people to the warehouse. I mean, it's just a nightmare for businesses. But yeah, that's feminist theory in action. Right, let's move on. Let's get back on to it. This is an interesting one. Do you see this? Now, this report's from the Daily Mail. I couldn't actually find the report online. It's been reported by another couple of news outlets. Some of them were behind paywalls. I couldn't actually get to any more details of what exactly did he say. But the report here says Britain's defender of the faith could face a dilemma over whether to give royal assent to measures decriminalizing late-term abortion and legalizing assisted suicide. Right, that was interesting, isn't it? Now, from what I get from the reports, these reports were definitely saying King Charles has said this. So it's not someone speculating or some advisor or whatever. The reports were saying King Charles has said this, that is really wrestling with his conscience, basically, about the fact that he would have to give royal assent, sign these laws in order for them to become active laws in the United Kingdom. Now, that, of course, reminds us of King, have I got those things? No, I haven't got that. King, I think it's Baudouin, however you say it, of Belgium in 1990, when Belgium passed an abortion law allowing abortion up to 12 weeks. King Baudouin, a Catholic, refused to sign the law. He just said, nope, I cannot sign that in good conscience. And so it ended up that he was removed from office for a day. So he abdicated for a day. And then while Belgium had no king, the cabinet could make the decision. So the cabinet, the government signed the law, passed the law in Belgium. And then they made Baudouin king again the day after. So he took a day off being king. Now, I think the Catholic Church is in the process of beatifying King Baudouin, making him a saint because of this stand that he took. Now, is that a heroic thing to do? Should we regard King Baudouin as heroic there, or should we regard him as just doing what anyone of that conviction should have done? I've been thinking about this a bit recently as well. Lots of people say, oh, Kate Forbes, she was so brave. Now, even leaving aside the fact that she said lots of things that I think she didn't really believe, just sticking to the things she did say that drew down disapproval on her, was she brave to say them? Was she brave to answer questions about what she believed and give a straight answer on the occasion she did? Was that brave? I mean, some people sometimes say to me, oh, you're very brave saying these things. I think we maybe need to get out of this way of thinking. The idea that it's somehow, above and beyond the call of duty to actually be open and honest about what you believe. We've got to get beyond that. I think we've got to have the assumption that stating clearly what you believe, at the very least when you're asked, should just be seen as the norm. It's not something just for special people to do. That's something that everybody should be ready to do. So going back to King Charles, so what will happen here? So let's say he's wrestling with his conscience. Let's say his conscience wins and he says he can't sign them. Then that would be a big constitutional crisis. To be honest, am I expecting that to happen? Are you expecting that to happen? No. I mean, King Charles has made his views known on an awful lot of issues so far. But I've never heard him making his views known on these two issues, particularly not abortion. I mean, I've never heard him say a word about it. So I would be extremely surprised if actually within King Charles there's a very strong pro-life conviction there. Very surprised indeed. So this report, maybe he has said something along those lines, but I would be staggered if he actually raises any obstacles to just signing these things into law, giving it royal assent. So it's interesting. This might be happening. I mean, if King Charles makes a comment about that, then that would they be good? Do we want him to make comments, or do we want him to be non-political? Well, that's a tricky question, isn't it? I would tend to say in routine political issues, he should keep his nose out of it. I think when it comes to matters of such fundamental moral import, I think it is appropriate for the monarch to say something there. But looking at King Charles's values, as we know about them thus far, it's environmentalism, it's like multi-faith, new agey, quite pro-Islam to some degree. I've heard very conflicting reports about that, but I've certainly never heard anything about pro-life. But let's see. It's interesting thinking about someone like King Charles, that, like everyone, they'll be very influenced by the people around them. But I mean, is there anyone around him, even any sort of advisor, that would put forward any pro-life position? I mean, there'll be various bishops, I would imagine, that he would spend time with. I mean, what's the chance that they'll be saying to him, hey, look, this is really totally out of order. This is completely against Christian teaching. I mean, if you take the random selection of bishops, I mean, probably not. He's not going to be hearing that. So I guess that's something, if you're doing any praying, you pray that these people come across the truth. I mean, who knows what King Charles browses on YouTube even? I mean, who knows? Who knows? Yeah, evil prospers when good men do nothing. Yeah, I think that is indeed what the king ought to be thinking. There is, should he do something to prevent this evil? He can't actually prevent it. Basically, he can't ultimately subvert the will of Parliament, but he could make his view clear, and he could make it. It would be a big event. It would be a big story, and the controversy related to these issues would be put front and center of the nation's consciousness and conscience, which would be a very good thing. As I say, though, don't hold your breath. I think this report is probably based on fairly slender evidence. I'm not saying it's not true. I mean, maybe he has said something like that. But yeah, I'll be very surprised. We shall see. Time will tell. Right, quick reminder. Abortion decriminalisation, of course, took place under the Labour government. Just a quick reminder that the Health Secretary of the previous Conservative government was also saying she backed decriminalisation of abortion as well. So I think it's important we don't see that too much as that's what happens when you get a Labour government, because the Conservatives' Health Secretary was along those lines as well. Right, here's a bigger issue to talk about. The whole asylum seekers, the migrant hotels, immigration thing. We've got policies about it. There's lots of things to say. I'm sometimes reluctant to say them for two reasons, because sometimes we say something about it and then the comments and the response, some of it is sort of a bit unpleasant and really hard line. And I end up thinking, I wish I'd never said that, because it's filled our social media up with things that are going to put other people off. And the other thing as well, sometimes we say something, then the response says, well, that's not enough. Basically, you're not angry enough. You need to be more positive or whatever about that. And then the other thing that puts me up saying anything, there's other people who seem so sensitive to the issue that as soon as you broach anything about immigration, they just react really extremely negatively, very strongly negatively. Say, oh, you just can't say that. You can't touch this issue at all. We do talk about it, but I'm saying that's what's going through my mind when I'm deciding to talk. Anyway, let's say a bit about it here. So Kemi Badenoch suggests that housing asylum seekers in camps instead of hotels. Right, what do I think of that? Right, what she means by camps, I assume the report wasn't entirely clear, would be like compounds. In other words, they wouldn't be free to wander around towns and cities. So they would be looked after, they would be fed and some sort of leisure facilities or whatever, but wouldn't be free to enter into the national life of Great Britain. Right, what do I think about that idea? I think absolutely correct. That's absolutely correct. Because that would take away a huge part of the incentive to illegal immigration. The incentive to illegal immigration is it's going to work. You know full well you're breaking the law. You jump on your boat or whatever other means. You arrive here. Okay, you might get put in a hotel or whatever, but you can disappear from a hotel. You can do some unofficial work and earn quite a lot of money while you're in that hotel. In other words, it works. So you know you're breaking the law. You know the government of the nation that you're imposing yourself on doesn't want you, thinks you shouldn't be there, and you're breaking their law, but basically they'll let you get away with this. So long as that's the situation, people will keep trying to come. The reason this young men, I don't like them being described as fighting age men. I think that's sort of a bit hysterical. It's trying to conjure up something that's unfair. But often the reason this young man is that families say, right, how can we make money? Let's send 20-year-old Ahmed or whatever, let's send him to Britain. He can work for a couple of years, send us a massive amount of money back by our standards, and then we'll be able to buy a new house. So that's why young men are sent over often, because that's a short-term mission to earn a pile of money. Now, you may think you're not going to earn a pile of money working for Deliveroo, but you send that money back to a very poor country, and it is an awful lot of money, because the standard of living, the exchange rates make it so. But if you put people in camps so that they're not going to have freedom to enter into wider society, that just takes away the incentive. And there have been a lot of crimes committed by these sort of illegal immigrants. There have been a lot, which is likely to happen when you have masses of young men basically coming over with no family, no girls of their culture. So what are they going to do? They're going to be looking, if you're an asylum seeker, you're not exactly in the prime position to be entering into the social life of the United Kingdom, finding a girlfriend or whatever. So often they often come from cultures where women are treated very badly, and sexual abuse and rape are, well, if not condoned, they're more common than they are here. So inevitably, there's going to be big problems. So then Kemi Badenoch's idea is absolutely correct, that the people ought to be looked at within secure compounds. And you may think, oh, that's going to be more expensive. However can you do that? But the saving will be, it will take away people's incentive to do it. So if people know you come to the UK, okay, the border force, whoever picks you up, then you're taken and put in a compound with a fence around it. Okay, I'm not saying it's uncomfortable or anything cruel about it. There are reasonable facilities, reasonable, but that's where you're going to stay. And if you string out the asylum process and appeal around, that's where you're going to stay. And basically, you can leave when you like. So what you hope, basically, these illegal immigrants would decide they want to leave in any case. I also think we should leave the ECHR, so we don't have to go through these protracted legal processes with every single one of them as well. So overall, I think good idea. Good idea. Right, Mr. Mellon, migration is the biggest single topic at the moment. Daily protests in England. Yeah, I think a lot of the media are downplaying these protests. I think it's unfortunate, because the truth is that if these protesters went and burnt a few things down, threw a few bricks at the police, then they'll get a lot more news coverage. It will be a national story. And to be honest, probably the government would be more inclined to be thinking, okay, what can we do to stop these protests? So there is a perverse incentive in that violent and aggressive protest, unfortunately, does seem to work more effectively. But these protests have been relatively civilized. So I think the media have been able to ignore them. Peter, the counter-protesters, it's the same. I always imagine there must be some people who, by their door, they've got a Palestine flag, they've got a Extinction Rebellion flag, they've got an LGBT flag, and they've got a migrants welcome flag. And they go out to the different events and just pick up a different one for the different events. Now, we've been invited to a couple of events that have been sort of related to illegal immigration. I mean, the biggest one was in George Square in Glasgow. It was about a year ago. Was it September last year? And we haven't been to them, not because we'd have nothing to say, not because we think everyone taking part is a really bad person, but just we expect that there will be elements there we wouldn't want to be associated with. There would probably be some things said that we wouldn't want to be associated with. So we've kept our distance. And I think we've been vindicated in that decision as well. If you look at what has gone on at some of these events, it has been out of order. Well, basically, we don't want to be anywhere near like a screaming mob about anything, basically, about anything. I mean, our style is more, okay, we'll have placards, we'll have a few speeches, maybe people might cheer or two, but we don't want to be in a crowd of people like hurling abuse at people over whatever issue. Basically, if that's the thing, we wouldn't be there. Like the pro-life chain in Edinburgh, if we knew that that's what that descended into every year, then we wouldn't go. Now, if there's other people shouting at us or throwing things at us or whatever, okay, that's fine. But if we think people on our side of the event are going to be doing that, then no, that's not for us. So we've stayed clear, and I think that was right move. A Christian king. Yeah, I think Queen Elizabeth was a Christian, as far as I could tell. King Charles, I'm not quite sure what he believes. But yeah, I think the royal family is tending to reflect the nation, I would say. Younger generations of the royal family, Prince William seems to be fairly sort of left, liberal, progressive in his outlook. I've heard somewhere someone saying that Kate has been more interested in religious things through her illness. I can't remember where I read that. So yeah, we shall see. We shall see. Conference venue, we will announce that soon. It's in Glasgow, 8th of November. Our conference is arrive at 10, start 10:30 till 4:30, I think. So we've just done an afternoon for the last couple of years, but we're going back to a whole day. So we're going to get some more speakers on different topics in there. We're going to look at quite a few of our different policy areas, look at some new policies in preparation for the Scottish election campaign. So it's a very important conference for us. So it's in the sort of west end, maybe not West End's not the right term, west side of Glasgow, and we'll be announcing more about that soon. So yeah, hope you can make it. I mean, Nicola Sturgeon's memoir has been dominating the news, hasn't it? I haven't read it. I'm not intending to read it. Lots of people have talked about it. The general consensus seems to be that it's sort of, a lot of it's a bit dull. It just tells the story of what happened in Scottish politics, but we already know it. But the side that's got more new things in is that Nicola Sturgeon's personal revelations. I mean, she's effectively said, in as many words, that she's bisexual. She's talked about, well, again, this is not particularly new. She's talked about, being depressed, lacking confidence, all these sort of things as well. Again, not particularly new. Another thing I would say about it, I think Nicola Sturgeon in particular, but Humza Yousaf as well, a lot of people absolutely hate them. So if you want to get people motivated and fired up about something in Scottish politics, then have a go at Nicola Sturgeon, have a go at Humza Yousaf. And there's a lot of people who will come to your side. I always joke that if I want to get like 10,000 views on a YouTube video next week, I just have to make one called Humza Yousaf as a total moron. And there'll be massive interest in that. Now, I can see why, because they're both very controversial figures. They're both very irritating and different, I would say personally, in very different ways as well. I think John Swinney is not like that. John Swinney is more bland. He's not going to particularly attract hatred from people. But I think the personal animosity towards Sturgeon and Yousaf was sort of unhealthy in some ways. It gets to the stage where people's political priority is being against Sturgeon or Yousaf or whatever. But anyway, one of the issues that came up, Sturgeon accuses Rowling over toxic gender reform row. So Nicola Sturgeon was trying to blame J.K. Rowling for the toxic tone of the transgender debate in Scotland. Now, I mean, Nicola Sturgeon stirred things up with some quite harsh language about her opponents as well. Let's remember, very definitely. But accusing J.K. Rowling of that, is that fair? Is that fair? Now, I would say maybe to some degree it is. I think with J.K. Rowling, a lot of people take the view, oh yeah, she was on the right side in the trans issue, so that's great. So she's an ally. I mean, J.K. Rowling will never be an ally of the family party because we overlap on that issue, but on a huge swathe of other issues, she's not on our wavelength at all. So J.K. Rowling, she's like a co-belligerent on the trans issue, but in general, she's not on our wavelength. In terms of tone in the argument, I would agree. I think sometimes the tone she uses has been unhelpful, aggressive, mocking, foul language, etc. So Nicola Sturgeon sort of, she got a point there. It's the pot calling the kettle black. But yeah, maybe a point. I think a couple of tweets from J.K. Rowling, just to, this one's just to show her underlying philosophy. I respect every trans person's right to live the way they want, the way that feels authentic and comfortable to them. I'd march with you if you were discriminated against on the basis of being trans. At the same time, my life has been shaped by being female, I do not believe it's hateful to say so. That's quite interesting, isn't it? Would I say that? No, I wouldn't. I respect every trans person's right to live the way that feels authentic and comfortable to them. Well, do I respect that right? It sounds like J.K. Rowling saying, if you feel this is what's right for you, this feels authentic and comfortable, then you go for it. I haven't got a problem with that. I'd make sure you're not discriminated against. What does discriminated against? Like, I think a trans person shouldn't be allowed to be a teacher, for example. So J.K. Rowling would be disagreeing with that. I mean, the right to live the way you want to. Okay, if someone wants to be transgender and, basically live their life as though they were the opposite sex, do I want that to be illegal? Well, probably not. And that's maybe something to discuss another day as well. Should it be legal to dress up as the opposite sex in public? I mean, I think in some countries that's not legal. You're not allowed to do that. So you see, J.K. Rowling's stance here is quite different from mine, quite different from the family parties as well. So her line is, okay, being trans, fine, great. If that's your thing, go right ahead. But it's just the way it impinges on me as a woman is the issue. Now we say, no, not at all. For a start, we're concerned for trans people because they're trying to build their life on a delusion, and that will not go well. So we're concerned for the well-being of transgender people because they've bought a lie that's going to be very harmful for them. And we would like to help them to move beyond the situation they found themselves in. The other thing is its effect on children as well. I do not want children teaching that, if you're trans, you've got the right to live any way that feels authentic and comfortable to you. No, that's a bad message for children. That's a bad message for society in general. But that's what J.K. Rowling is saying. So it's quite a different angle. And let's just have a look at this. This is from just a couple of days ago, I think, this year. I won't read it. Well, I'll read some of it. Well, you can read it for yourself there. So has Nicola Sturgeon got a case about J.K. Rowling tending to turn the debate a little toxic by her tone? Well, yes. Yeah, of course. And to her credit, Nicola Sturgeon wouldn't use that sort of language and tone. I mean, she would say things that are totally wrong, and she would be harsh and unfairly critical and hysterical and whatever, but she wouldn't say things like that. She'd be more professional than to say things like that. So Nicola Sturgeon's got we'll give her half a point there for that one. Sturgeon, recent media is simple adverts to sell a book. No idea why the media indulge it. It's a good point. I mean, the amount of media coverage, that's a good point. The amount of media coverage for Nicola Sturgeon's book has been monumental. It's like the Herald, there was about 4 articles, if not 5, on their homepage, on their website. It was quite remarkable. And a lot of it is sort of tittle-tattle stuff, really, but they're assuming people are interested in it one way or another. I mean, Nicola Sturgeon was absolutely adored, as Alex Salmond was on. My theory is that with Scottish nationalism to a lot of Scottish nationalists is seen as a moral cause. It's not a common or garden political issue. It's a moral cause. And for some people, that's the purpose of their life. So your leader who is leading the movement towards this ultimate moral purpose of your life, it's not like a regular political party leader where, okay, yeah, I think they're pretty good. I think they might get us elected and do the sort of things that we agree with. I think it's more than that with the SNP. It's a deeper connection than that. I think that's why we see some of the almost like veneration, adoration of SNP leaders. I think that we've got that at the moment. I think that's because John Swinney, not the sort of figure to inspire that. I think maybe he's not the sort of figure who sort of wants it either. And I sometimes find myself saying relatively positive things about John Swinney compared to his predecessors. But we've got to bear in mind that the fundamental underlying evils of the Scottish government continue unabated under John Swinney. So I think we might be about at the end, aren't we? We are. Perfect timing. Just about got to the end. So, yeah, a little reminder again. So the conference, 8th of November, another couple of events coming up on the 21st of August. Let me check that. There's an Edinburgh meeting. Yep, in the Picture House on Lothian Road. Picture House is Wetherspoons, so very interesting Wetherspoons. Check social media for the time, but 21st of August, I guess. You have a meal or don't have a meal, but we'll meet up for a chat. And also, we've got a social scheduled in Aberdeen as well. And that is the Sunday evening, the 14th of September, 8 till 9:30 p.m. So again, check social media. Conference, 8th of November, Edinburgh event, Aberdeen event. We'll have other events lined up soon, but the biggie is the conference. Do get your tickets for the conference. As I say, it's an all-day event, and then afterwards there will be a meal. The last couple of years we've had the conference, then we've had like nibbles and drinks in the same venue for everyone who's been to the conference. What we're doing this time, we're going back to what we used to do when we had the conference in Dunfermline. They will have the conference, finish up, tie that up, and then we will meet at a nearby restaurant for a meal, which you'll basically have to pay for, obviously. So the meal this time is optional. When we did it in Dunfermline, it was really great. I think we had, how many people? I don't know, about 40 people or something, 40 or 50 people. Stayed for the meal. We had a good time. We won't be having any entertainment because it will be in a restaurant. We're not going to book an exclusive function suite or anything. But anyway, keep your eye open. That will be out soon. So thanks for watching. Thanks for your comments, and see you soon. Right. Good night.